Hollywood's a funny town. One minute, you're on top of the world. The next, you're yesterday's news, tossed to the curb with the rest of the industry's forgotten faces. This isn't a story about a movie. It's a story about control, about power, about what happens when someone reaches too high, grabs too much, and underestimates the man they're trying to bury. It started the way these things always do. Small, quiet, a shift in tone, a change in attitude. When Blake Lively arrived on set, she wasn't just playing a role. She was auditioning for a new one. Not just the lead actress, but the director, the producer, the one pulling the strings. The problem? There was already a man in that chair. And his name was Justin Baldoni. Baldoni was the type Hollywood doesn't make anymore. A true believer. The kind of guy who thought movies could change the world. Who wanted to tell stories that mattered. He wasn't the problem. That was the problem. He listened too much. Took in too many ideas. Thought collaboration meant something. And Blake? She saw that as weakness. And in Hollywood, weakness is a target. She didn't read the book. That was the first red flag. The role called for soft romance, light dresses, cardigans, the quiet strength of a woman healing. But Blake had a different vision. Oversized coats, designer boots, sharp edges where there should have been warmth. The budget started bleeding before the cameras even rolled. And Baldoni? He let it happen. Mistake number one. Then came the whispers. The little shifts. The crew who once looked to Baldoni for guidance, suddenly looking to her. Ideas, suggestions, changes, spoken in hushed voices, but loud enough to be heard. He wasn't the director anymore. Not really. She was. He just hadn't realized it yet. Ryan Reynolds was there too. Always watching. At first, friendly, supportive, the perfect Hollywood husband, smiling in the background. But Reynolds doesn't just stand in the background. He's a player, a strategist. And if history's taught us anything, it's that when Ryan Reynolds wants control of a movie, he finds a way to get it. And this time, he didn't have to play the villain. Blake was already doing the work for him. Then came the contract. One line, simple, easy to overlook. No harassment of Blake Lively, innocent on paper, a loaded gun in reality. The kind of thing that could be twisted, reinterpreted, used when the moment was right. Wayfair Studios signed it. Baldoni signed it. Because why wouldn't they? What was the harm? Mistake number two. And then, one by one, the cast flipped. People who'd been with Baldoni from the start, suddenly colder, more distant. Conversations stopped when he walked into the room. Notes were being passed through different hands. And the strangest part? Every single one of them ended up with a new project. A connection to Ryan. A call from Blake. Hollywood doesn't believe in coincidence, neither do I. And then, the first shot. The New York Times, front page, a well-timed, perfectly crafted hit piece. Anonymous sources, leaked text messages, a toxic work environment. The kind of story that spreads like wildfire. But here's the thing about Hollywood. When a scandal is real, people scramble. They delete tweets, they hide, they run. But this was too clean, too precise, the work of professionals. And Baldoni, he was the mark. He fought back. Of course he did. A website, a statement, the real messages untouched, unedited. Proof that the story was a lie. But in Hollywood, proof doesn't matter. Only perception does. And by the time he'd shown his cards, the game had already moved on. Studios got nervous. Investors pulled back. And suddenly, the man who was supposed to direct a film about strength and survival was fighting for his own. Baldoni was alone. That's how Hollywood does it. It doesn't kill you outright. It isolates you, strips you of allies, turns your name into something people whisper about, but never say too loudly. They make you untouchable in all the ways that matter. And for a while, it worked. But Baldoni wasn't completely alone. His family, the ones who still believed in him, gathered around him, lifted him up, refused to let him disappear. And when the night of the premiere came, They weren't going to let him sit at home and watch his name fade away. No. If this was his execution, he was going to watch it happen, so he went. They didn't ban him. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they kept him out of sight, out of mind. He sat in a small, dimly lit room beneath the theater, watching the film he had poured his soul into play on a screen meant for afterthoughts. He watched as the audience above him gasped, cried, felt emotions that wouldn't have been there without him. But down in that basement, he was just another shadow, a man watching his career slip away in real time. Meanwhile, Blake walked the red carpet like she had already won. She smiled for the cameras. She posed with Ryan. She basked in the glow of victory. She thought it was over, that she had rewritten the ending, that Baldoni was just another footnote in a town that moves too fast to remember the people it leaves behind. And for a moment, she believed it, until she stepped off the carpet and checked her phone. Blake Lively had spent her entire career controlling the press. But that night, for the first time, she wasn't controlling anything. The headlines weren't glowing reviews. The tweets weren't fawning admiration. The public, her public, had turned. It had started small, little things. A few offhand comments about how out of touch she sounded, how the press tour felt off, how a movie about DV survivors was being marketed like a Vogue editorial. But then, it snowballed. And the deeper people dug, the uglier it got. She had expected backlash, but not like this. Not against her, not against Ryan. In their world, they were untouchable. But this time, the public wasn't buying it. And Blake Lively, the woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of perception, was watching it crumble in real time. The footage of Baldoni in the basement surfaced. It wasn't an accident. Someone in the theater, someone with a camera, had caught it. The contrast was too sharp, too brutal, too undeniable. On one screen, Blake and Ryan, glowing, radiant, untouched. On the other, Baldoni, alone, discarded, watching the movie from underground. Hollywood doesn't do symbolism, but the internet does. The image went viral in minutes. The narrative shifted in real time. The public that had been spoon-fed a story about a chaotic, unprofessional director suddenly saw something else. A man who had built something and had it taken from him. A man erased. Hollywood tried to erase him. Instead, they created a movement. When the backlash hit, the fixers didn't panic. They mobilized. A CIA crisis manager, a specialist in media suppression and reputation destruction, was brought in. Their job? Make Baldoni's name radioactive. The first move was predictable. Kill the narrative before it grows. Suppress, discredit, misdirect. Whispers about his credibility appeared online. Fake accounts, anonymous sources, industry insiders suddenly warning that maybe, just maybe, Baldoni wasn't the man people thought he was. But something happened that Hollywood didn't expect. The internet fought back. The resistance grows. They went after the TikTok sleuths first. One by one, creators who had spoken up about the basement footage started getting hit. Videos removed, accounts flagged, legal threats sliding into inboxes. Some backed down, most didn't. Because this wasn't just about Baldoni anymore. It was about who gets erased and who gets protected. Instagram threads, YouTube deep dives, Twitter breakdowns. It only fueled the fire. The more they tried to silence the conversation, the louder it got. And Baldoni? He didn't run. He didn't hide. A man who refused to disappear. While PR teams worked overtime to scrub his name from the industry, he was doing something Hollywood never expected. He wasn't fighting for himself. During the wildfires, while Hollywood's elite fled to private estates and untouched coastal compounds, Baldoni opened his home. Not for press, not for image control, but for people. 2 families, displaced, without anywhere to go. He gave them shelter. No cameras, no headlines, just action. And the internet? The internet remembered. Because while one side played the same tired Hollywood game, the other side was building something real. A movement, a resistance. The public had already turned, but now Now, they were choosing a side. The war on perception turns real. For the first time, the machine was breaking. Hollywood was watching carefully now. Some celebrities started liking posts about Baldoni. Quiet support, subtle, enough to send a signal. A few studio execs started asking questions, off the record, just in case. Because this was getting bigger than a scandal. This was a reckoning, and the moment it became clear that they couldn't silence the internet, the lawsuit hit. March 2026, the trial that could change everything. Baldoni wasn't supposed to fight back. He was supposed to fade out, be forgotten, be a cautionary tale. Instead, he was walking into a courthouse. This time, he wasn't alone. Not just his family, not just his legal team, but the thousands of people who had rallied behind him. The ones who had watched the PR spin in real time. The ones who had been attacked, silenced, and threatened for asking the wrong questions. Blake's team had controlled the narrative for a decade, but they had never gone to war against the internet itself. And now the industry was watching. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't being written in backroom deals and carefully managed headlines. It was going to trial, and Hollywood wasn't ready. Just two people, walking towards something that neither of them could control anymore. One had spent a career mastering public perception. The other had built a career on telling the truth. And now, only one of them was walking in with the public on their side. The courthouse doors open. One by one, they step inside. Hollywood tried to write the ending. But the thing about the truth always writes itself.